Hello, hi, welcome everyone back to Gray Skeptic. I'm your host, Mac, and I am here with Topic Thunder. Miss,
You didn't say tropic. I love it.
So, how are you doing this morning?
Really well, actually. It's a bit of a grey, drizzly day in sunny old England. So yeah, so I put on some springtime threads just to sort of warm myself up a little bit. But no, really, really good, and really, really excited for our conversation because I really enjoyed our first one. So.
Awesome. Yeah. Me too. And I need to post that down below in the little diddly do. Yeah. I need to get that up, and I'll do that when I'm not talking to you.
Our original conversation, our first one. Our first conversation that we had, our first Google Hangout.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Because it's on your channel. Because I watch it occasionally just to see how many goofs I made. Yeah.
Don't worry about that, because a lot of people have already watched it. Actually, that was one of my most viewed videos for a while. People like you.
No, I'm a novelty. It's okay. it's the accent, apparently.
So, but yeah, I'm very much looking forward to our conversation this morning. I'm very happy to have you back on. I haven't had a lot of people on more than once, so this is fun. This is cool. You have restarted your channel, but it's been a little over a month ago.
Yeah.
Do you want to briefly talk about why you came back, why you left in the first place? And I know you went over that a little bit on Steve McRae's channel, but if you want to let everyone know here.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're speaking to Steve, you've got to be quick because he will speak more. So I didn't really get, because he sort of he teased me a little bit. Even at the beginning, before we went live, he said, you don't have to talk about the specifics. And then he talked about the specifics. So, but no, I didn't really get a chance to sort of explain myself very well. But, that's the great thing about Hangouts. They're fluid. You never know what's going to happen. Yes. But yeah, I was loving it, as you know, and I was meeting all these amazing people and having really amazing, diverse conversations, and it never even occurred to me that anybody would watch the videos aside from perhaps me and my husband and my mum, and yay, get you. But of course, it started to gather some speed, and I was, it was really exciting. And then I think with anything like this. Not just in the sense of being online and putting yourself out there and being a content creator, because it's so vastly different than that sort of learning curve. And I keep calling it a baptism of fire, but that's probably the closest thing I could think of. But also, given the nature of a lot of what we talk about is very incendiary and can really sort of rile people up. And you don't need a lot on the internet, do you, to rile people up? And there's me talking about these really sort of, personal, deep sort of religious beliefs that people have. And whilst I felt that I was putting across, a fairly balanced view, and I don't feel like I was teasing them or anything like that. You are going to get people who are going to, not like that very much. But I was dealing with all that quite well, considering, because I'm not ashamed to say I'm quite a sensitive person, but to me, it was almost, it was benefiting me because I was seeing all the different aspects of the apologetic side and the believers, but the ones that you can actually have a decent conversation with, and the myriad of people that I was meeting. So it wasn't all these sort of real fundamentalists, I suppose is the word to use. But I poked the Islamic bear. That's the only thing way I can describe it. And the silly thing was, it wasn't even anything that I said on my channel or anything like that. I sort of chimed in on a thread on Cosmic Skeptic's Twitter thing, and Twitter thread, and it was in regards to the Prophet and his, childhood bride, yeah. And so, I mean, anything like that is just going to be, what does Steve call them, a dumpster fire. And so, yeah, I sort of chimed in on that, and I let myself down a little bit because I got involved knowing full well that there was a lot of emotion behind it on my end. Although I feel that what I put was an argument from morality, I had an emotional investment in it because obviously I have a little girl and she's 4. So I was sort of thinking, how could anyone sort of in 2 years think that it's okay to marry her? Of course, I know in the historical context, child marriages were taking place all over. So I wasn't trying to deny the fact that they occurred or the historical aspect of it. But as we know, it's not, you can argue it all the live long day, but it's just, we know now it's not the right thing to do. And I had somebody sort of react to it, and I shouldn't have carried on, but I was so surprised that somebody could feel, he wasn't really a paedophile apologist, but he wasn't making his case either, he was just attacking,
Right. How dare you?
Yeah, so he just had this sort of attitude, and of course I just sort of let myself get sort of roped into it a little bit because I did have a sort of an emotional investment in it as well. So what happened was we had a bit of a to and fro, and whilst it never got really out of hand, he didn't threaten me or anything like that. He was just being a bit of a dick, really. And so I sort of came out of it, and in a sense, the first thing I did was I sort of screenshot what he said and asked my followers, which of course a lot of you are like me, you're in the skeptic community and that sort of thing, just to say, look, was I wrong in thinking this way? Is this guy got a point? Because I want to sort of see everything from all angles. And of course everybody was sort of saying no. And it wasn't necessarily to get people to agree with me, it was more in the sense of a lot of these, like I said, a lot of what is happening to me in terms of the responses I'm getting are new to me. I haven't been in the skeptic community for years. I haven't been, a staunch atheist for years. I was just an atheist. I was walking around an atheist, but now I've got more, it's obviously something I talk about more. So a lot of these sort of things are going to be happening to me, or the conversations are going to be happening to me for the first time.
Yes.
So I sought advice, and he didn't like that. And the next day I got a message from what I now understand to be a stock account. Again, didn't know what this was. So it was all a bit sort of perhaps a bit of naivety on my part. But yes, and he was sort of saying this awful stuff. And it really surprised me. I thought, I wasn't, perhaps I was harsh in my words, but I wasn't rude to him in a normal sense. I wasn't swearing or anything like that. I wasn't throwing in ad hominems or anything like that. I was just sort of passionately arguing. And so yeah, I'm sorry, you spent an entire day mulling over this, and then you're going to send me messages about it. And it was just so surprising. Of course, now I realise that's pretty much part of the course for a lot of these people. So I understand it now, but at the time I was just like, gosh, this guy's really got a problem with me. And I just sort of started to ruminate about it. And of course, it being connected in a sense with somebody who's obviously very, fervent follower, from what I gathered, of Islam, that, there could be a possible danger there, especially with what he was saying and the nature of it being a stock account and stuff like that. So he's fairly passionate enough to want to hide his identity. And I just got it in my head, that there might be a danger there.
Yeah.
And now I understand that this sort of thing happens all the time. But at the time, I thought, bloody hell, I'd waded in on this. Had I given it enough, sort of forethought and things like that? Was I being too cocky because it was so much fun talking to you guys? And, I just got it in my head that I perhaps, touched on things that I shouldn't have done yet without knowing the consequences. And of course, you can't know until you try. So the reason I came back was I missed it greatly. I missed researching, I missed writing for the videos, I missed filming them. And I hated the fact that I was scared. That's, when you put it, I hated my fear. And if anybody has seen some of my previous videos, obviously I used to suffer from mental health issues. And of course, I didn't want to be so naive into thinking that, you have, with somebody like me, I have to take precautions to make sure that I don't being more sensitive and things like that. And rumination for me obviously causes bigger problems. So I have to be careful in that sort of sense of being able to separate myself from it. But I got it in my head. I thought, no, I'm not going to run away. I'm not going to, you know, not do this because of this person. And when I had the idea that I was going to come back, I felt wonderful. I felt great. I thought, no, this is really good. And I'm only going to learn by doing. I'm going to get tougher by doing. That's how you learn resilience. You just keep getting up and keep going back. And it's not to say that there'll be times, especially if I'm lucky enough to grow, you know, a larger audience, I'm going to get more of that. So I need to sort of build up, you know. It's not to say that having emotional reaction is a bad thing. We're all human beings.
Right.
But, you know, it's whether or not it stops you. And I thought, bugger that, I really like this. So
yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like you don't want your emotions to control you.
Exactly. Yeah, but I can't be foolish. You know, I do have to consider that, you know, I'm, you know, I have a family to, obviously to take care of as well and things like that. And I've got to take care of my own sort of mental state. But it shouldn't be at the cost of me, you know, doing this and you know, maintaining wonderful friendships with people like yourself.
Well, I also enjoy your friendship. I'm very glad that we stayed in a contact
Yeah.
as that was going on.
Yeah. And everybody was so understanding as well. I felt like I've fell at the first hurdle, and you know, I think we did like a big conversational stream, and everybody was they understood and nobody judged me. Even Steve, who's a bit like, oh, forget the troll sort of thing, he was, you know, he was very understanding, and so, you know, you've all had it. And especially Shannon, oh my God, the stuff Shannon gets and the stuff that Rachel gets.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
She's always like the first person I think of when I think of like shitty comments, like her and like GE, because he gets a lot of really.
Oh God, yeah. But, so it's par for the course, but it's not to say that it's right. And the irony is that some of the worst stuff comes from people who consider themselves staunch Christians. You know, I'm not saying it's just the Christians, and there's things like hypocrisy much, you know, like just let them, because none of us are sort of like going up to people's doors like they do and say, you know, convert to atheism. You can't convert to atheism, but you know what I mean. We're just talking about these things and we're passionate about them. We're passionate about human rights and things that, you know, are a good thing. I'm not saying that there's some people who have, you know, who are, not every atheist is a nice person, you know, they just happen to hold this sort of train of thought. Yeah, so it's, but what I'm saying is from what I've seen of the content creators, even the humorous ones, the ones that do like to kind of poke fun, are doing so with what they consider to be aspects of the truth. You know, they're not making this stuff up. It is an opinion in a sense, but it's still something they're saying. Whereas it's this is
you
this.
Just broke up. You just roboted out a little bit.
Yeah.
You just roboted out just a little bit. I didn't hear that last two sentences. I'm sorry.
Oh, good, because it was disgusting. I was swearing.
It's so vile. So what were you saying there? What did I miss?
Well, just, you know, the fact that you know, your different content creators we've all got a different way of dealing with the subject matter at hand. And I think that in the early days of YouTube atheism, there were people that would just seem to come across very abrupt, but that was just their nature. You know, I couldn't say whether or not they were trying to be needlessly provocative, but, you know, that's just how they were. And I've come to realize that myself, that there's an aspect of, you know, conversational implicature where you need to express yourself clearly because there's going to be an audience meaning, as opposed to, you know, people are going to take sometimes what they think you're saying given the context. So you need to try and be as clear as you can be. And I was speaking to Steve about this last night actually, and saying, you know, I've had a few comments on my one of my atheist videos, and he was actually a really nice guy, and he sort of pointed out, he did a point-by-point thing of his contentions of what I'd said, and I was sort of, you know, sitting there giving it its due, because of course, like I said, I'm new to all of this, and so I thought, oh, you know, his insight is interesting, and I realised that I think he's a person of faith himself, judging by the way he was sort of talking, and he, you know, sort of was turning it around to the way he viewed it. And I thought, okay, you know, I'm taking on what he's saying, but at the same time, I thought, well, we both think we're right. And he seems to be the kind of person, judging, like I said, judging from his comments, and we had a little bit of a conversation, that he might be able to be convinced of something else, which is quite rare, isn't it, in the apologetic side of things? But
yeah, you don't do that a lot.
Yeah. So, but that's the rarity, is that they don't tend to sort of shift from their belief. So what have you got to sort of contend with? But I said to Steve, I said, you know, is there a way to make it so that, you know, you're getting your point across, you're giving examples without making it so boring and so, for example, he said something about there's nothing in the Bible about, what was it? Oh gosh, I think it was a reference to procreation. There was a little point in there, and he was right. I didn't take that from the Bible. It was from St. Augustine. I've been reading a lot about him, and he had a real sort of dislike for the sex. Yeah, I mean, this guy, I mean, you know, he just didn't like it. So that's such a basic understanding of it, but he had some real things to say if you could sort of look into it. And so I was taking from what he was saying. He was quoted or was written as saying, you know, a woman is a defective man, you know, with a product of a curved bone, we're sexually, you know, deviant and things like this. And of course, in the nature of my video, I was sort of like doing it in a sort of tongue-in-cheek sort of way, but with examples of what I was saying. And whilst it wasn't written in the Bible, in terms of how he worded it, he obviously was somebody in a high-ranking religious person. So who do we take, you know, quotes from, and who do we not take quotes from when it serves the purpose of our conversation? So, but imagine me every time I say something in a video, then saying this is quoted from blah blah blah, the reference is blah blah blah. You know, you've got to give yourself a little bit of credibility to say, okay, well, she said that, I don't think that's right, I'm going to go research it. But of course, who does that? You know, it's one of those things, comment. But he was actually quite cool about it. You know, he was sort of like, well, I don't think it's, of course, you know, all the omnibenevolent, or the omniness in the Bible isn't written in there either. But of course, that's used as a philosophical argument for God. You know, omnipresence and all that sort of omnisciency and things like that.
Aquinas, right? Exactly.
Yes. So you can sort of pick and choose all the live long day where you get the quotes from, but in a basic sense, there's people of a religious view stating certain things, there's people of an atheist view stating certain things, and we tend to go less on the literal or non-literal take on a particular quote or a reference or something like that, whereas we're like, you know, we want to find some concrete evidence because we feel that's the strongest way to argue against it. So again, it goes back to literary understanding. That's why I don't think discussing the Bible is helpful, really. I mean, it's an amazing piece of work if you really think about it, but at the same time, it to me, it gives no credibility to the conversation of whether or not a deity exists. I'm going to get so much crap for that. But you see what I mean? I can write a book now, 1,000 years it's found, obviously depending on how many people follow it. You know, you can give something credence because it's old, you know, the argument from tradition. You can give something reverence because people seem to have a certain way about them that makes them, you know, sort of appear very virtuous. But it's all surface level stuff. So, you know, I want to get to the, you know, the nitty gritty. I want to get to the bottom, you know, from the bottom up. Be like science, you know, be prohibitive. Keep trying to prove yourself wrong, and then hopefully you'll get to the truth. Right. And unfortunately, faith really gets in the way of that. And I think there's a lot of people who are theists that actually could do that if for one day they just remove the aspect of I think this because God. Remove that, look at it, and then I don't know how they'd come away without some sort of questioning. But
yeah, and like I agree, because like on one hand, like the Bible is absolutely a good thing to talk about in these conversations, and I feel like it's good for us to know what's in it. Like especially me being a former Christian, like I have some background in the Bible, like I know about it, so it's good to bring it up to one, let them know, yes, I actually do know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And two, I don't ignore the bad stuff in it. Like,
no.
My favorite people to talk to are like the evangelicals, like the ones who are like really fundamentally like with the Bible and even know like the crap. I'm like, cool. So now you and I can talk about, and you know about all the dirty shit that's in the Bible. So how is that moral?
Exactly.
But what I'm getting from you, more or less, in a nutshell, is that you really like to focus on the philosophy, on the mindsets of like what is God, and like why do you believe in this at all, right? Like why does it make sense?
It's almost like when I think about it in a visual sort of sense in my mind, I think about the Bible as being the decoration in the house that faith built. And the foundations being these ideas of the teleological argument and the sort of ontological arguments and the necessity for a first mover and all this sort of stuff, because really you could pop in any deity to that. It's not necessarily, I mean, the fact that people use this argument in terms of the Christian God, for the most part, just happens to be a matter of circumstance. But if we are able to sort of shake the foundations, then surely the rest won't be so secure. And it's not like I'm on a mission to say I'm going to take your faith away, because faith is incredibly strong. And in essence, we all carry some form of faith when we do. And I think sometimes because we're so centered on the religious aspect of faith, we don't think about, I'm just sort of thinking here about things like sports and stuff like that, when you evidence that it's going to do well, but you have a feeling, you know, you get emotional. Last year we had the World Cup, and England don't often do so well, and so not a lot of people were getting sort of excited about it. And then we started to do well, and the whole country, it felt, got caught up in it, and you know, people were smiling, and they were sort of like, it's all you talked about, even if you weren't into football, you know. And I even found myself thinking, oh my gosh, we might be able to actually do this. We haven't won since before. Well, we can't help but feel
a robot again.
Oh no.
Okay.
It's my bloody Wi-Fi, isn't it? Sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I just want to let you know. It cut you off a couple times, but we could still hear what you were saying, and then
good.
And then I missed the last thing you said, but that was it.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out if it's on my end, because you're coming through great. Yeah. So you know, I understand how powerful faith can be, and belief, and especially if it's intrinsic to your social, you know, life and your family life and generationally. So I do understand it, and I think that has, you know, merit to talk about that. I know Shannon does, in terms of, you know, the psychology of belief. I just think they're the more helpful things to talk about, the very beginnings of what we consider to be a first mover in the cause and things like that, and then the psychology of it, because I think they're the stronger arguments for or against than talking about, you know, things written by several authors at a time. We can't ask them, you know, what they meant by this. Do we take it literally? Is it a metaphor? You could literally spend the next 500 years, and well, people have, you know, talking about this work that, you know, people live by. And like Rachel said, you can open up the Bible and it can have an answer for you for almost any question. but so can a lot of other books. I have to say, you know, philosophy to me is beautiful. It scares some people because it really makes them think. But you know, things like existentialism and why am I here and all this. But to me, it's just like, you know, it's opening up so many different thoughts and things like that. So I found that to be incredibly inspiring. But what I'm not going to do is, you know, knock on everybody's door saying you must follow Descartes, or, you know, do you like sort of Hume, or are you more of a Mill man? You know, you just that's not happening. You know, it's a personal thing, and of course that's where we carry our passion, because they're trying to, you know, push aspects of religion and even using the Bible to sort of bolster their political sort of aspirations and things like that, anti-LGBT stuff, that sort of thing, abortion rights and things like that, on a book that is very old, has been added to, changed, edited, and can literally mean anything to anyone. It can cause you to feel wonderful one day and kill the next. So I'm obviously speaking on different ends of the scale here, but you know, it's not, to me, it's not the sort of it's not the more important question to be answered in a sense.
Yeah, and I think my biggest issue, if I haven't said it once or twice, is just the belief aspect of it. It's just like it's the faith. Like, we don't necessarily have good evidence that this book is true, except for the book itself. We don't have any evidence except circular reasoning. So with that said, I think the philosophical questions are really the more compelling ones. Like, just thinking about it, right? And like going through your thoughts and tearing them down, and just trying to figure out, does this make sense? Is this logical? And a lot of people who have faith, I think they're allergic to the words "I don't know." So they kind of build on to their beliefs, no matter how strong they are, and no matter how much they even know about it. I think it's kind of a one God fits all kind of thing. So like, okay, this is my God, and like everyone will say that, and they'll say just about anything to make him fill in all the gaps, right? Like, we know this. So I think that blind faith really just continuously builds to itself for every other person. That's why there's like, I think I heard like 40,000 different versions of God in just the US or something like that. That's a lot, but it's all still the same guy. But it's not, because it can't be. Like, it can't literally be everything, which is what I thought for a little while. Like I thought he was just this supreme consciousness that is a part of everyone, and that's how he understands everyone. That's how he knows what everyone's thinking. That's how he can control everything or whatever. Like, I just built so much onto it to make it foolproof and make it infallible, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a problem, because the more you think about it to justify it, the more you have to make it unbreakable. And when you do that, you get away from that one piece of evidence that you say that you have, because that's not in the Bible. Like you said, he's not necessarily if I could talk, omnipotent. He's not all powerful. He's not all knowing. He's not all anything. Like, he asks questions in the Bible, right? So it's good to, again, use that as a source. But really, the things that really helped me get out of it was the exact thing that got me deeper in, was asking questions and being like, does this make sense? And then you need to, if you're very religious, you need to go back, ask yourself, okay, what makes sense? And then read the Bible and see if it makes sense with what you think. So that's my little spiel.
Yeah. No, it is one of the, and as I think there's further studies showing that, you know, a lot of Christians, I think they did a poll in America that hadn't actually read pretty much most of the Bible, and yet use it as a sort of, you know, a way to live. It sort of affects their ways they vote, things like that. And you think, well, God, you know, you've only got one life, at least that's what we think. You know, you might want to have a look into that, because you might not feel the same way. And I've spent, you know, even the time where I was away, where I wasn't sure I was going to come back, I wanted to study more, because I just think, you know, I really need to make sure that, you know, for conversations like this, I'm ready, and I don't want to appear, you know, uneducated on it. And whenever I have a spare moment, if I'm not filming or writing, I'm reading philosophy books. I'm one of those terrible people that reads 5 books at a time. I can't just finish one. I'm just like, oh, philosophy, oh yes, read about the Bible and other things. So
it's hard enough for me to read one at a time.
Well, I'm terrible. I think it's because I get sleepy. I have to sort of like change, you know, it wakes me up again. And I think Activist suggested on Twitter, he said, are you sure you're not, you know, you need to get yourself tested for narcolepsy? I never thought of that, but it's true. Honestly, I will start to read a page and it could be the most amazing book, like Sapiens, and I'm just sort of like drifting off, and it's not the book, it's me. I just get far too relaxed. But I find, you know, it's such an amazing way to learn. I do my research online as well, but having a book in your hand is something really wonderful about that. And I'm constantly writing notes as well, so I've got bits of paper all over the place. But I've forgotten where my train of thought. There you go. Yeah, so I'm always studying, and I'm always trying to, you know, sort of ascertain why this occurs and why that occurs. And of course, if you're not sort of boned up on your knowledge, a lot of apologists will obviously jump on that. But the difference will always be, I'm always willing to question. And they can't really say that on their end. They state it that they do, but everything is, like you said, it's circular. They'll say, well, yes, but I have faith. And it's like, that's not an answer. I'm more than, you know, be willing to be convinced that, you know, there might be a God, but based on what I've seen, I not only don't buy it, but I think it's kind of ridiculous. And I'm not, I don't want to get so much shit for that as well. But Alex, I think he's sort of in his early sort of time when he did interviews and stuff, would often repeat stuff that Christopher Hitchens said, because there were such compelling arguments, and he would use his own wording and stuff like that. But one of the things that stuck with me is he said about the whole anthropomorphizing, you know what I mean, of God, and why the first mover had to be in the image of a man, and, you know, a father figure. Why couldn't it have just been energy, or why couldn't it have been just the Big Bang itself? We had to put a human aspect to it. And not only did he not sort of care about all the other planets, but he named us as his chosen thing to worry about, when really we're kind of, but we don't exactly live in balance with our environment, and of course we're subject to sin, which of course is all conveniently explained, isn't it? You know, so, you know, this putting humankind on a pedestal it just seems odd to me, when we share the planet with so many other things that live in better harmony with, you know, their surroundings, and, you know, function amazingly, and that are still in obviously a state of evolution. I mean, who can explain the aardvark? But do you know what I mean? They sort of, you know, they don't overconsume and things like that. We're the ones that, you know, we need a lot of explaining, apparently, instead of us just being one of those animals that we just all happen to, you know, have evolved and we still exist. But okay, you can argue we've got a higher level of consciousness and all that sort of aspect. But we know now it doesn't need to be explained like a fairy tale. It doesn't need restriction. We just need, and the more people that come to that line of thinking, the more, you know, power and sort of fandom I think science will get, because religious people speak about science as if it's this very cold thing that will take away any mystery.
It's the devil.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that it'll help answer the questions, and that is so rare. I think I read the other day in philosophy, 99% of what you say in philosophy will be ignored by humankind, which made me laugh because, of course, philosophy is often questions that can't be answered, but at least you ask the questions.
Yes.
And science is the one thing that we've got that can actually get us really, really close. And that's why they don't like it, because once you have an answer, or at least something that you can definitively prove or is unfalsifiable, it doesn't leave much room for, well, I think this happened, or have faith that this happened. That's why they don't like it. It's not a cold thing. It's science isn't a thing. It's just a process. So they just have this, sort of weird obsession with science being the bad guy, and it's really not.
Right. And I think there's so many underlying problems here. I think it's one, like, so many of us are brought up with this at such a young age. So
yeah. That's how
so what I was going to say is people don't like cognitive dissonance. And if you were brought up with this at an early age, you will 99% of the time have cognitive dissonance about any other explanation about how we came to be, why things are the way they are, and why you are here. What's the meaning of life? Like, if you are spoon-fed that at a young age, on a faith-based belief, everything else is just taboo. It's just taboo, and it causes you double think, right? And it's a real problem. We don't teach critical thinking like we should. Like, I think we should teach philosophy.
Oh yes.
Like in high school. Like by the time you're 16, okay, it's time to teach you that beliefs are up for question. That's just the way it is. That's how society should be, I think. I think, like, we should just be allowed to question anyone's beliefs. Maybe, like, not at all times, because there's a time and a place. Like, you're not supposed to talk politics at work as well as religion. That's fair, right? But if you are sharing your beliefs, then you are sharing them to be challenged, I think. Not just in a teaching manner.
Especially if they're having negative consequences for some people as well. I think it's more than fair. It's more than fair to talk about them.
Yeah, and that's why I call myself an anti-theist, is because I think just the belief aspect, just the faith part, is consequential enough. I think that makes it a net negative. Just because it opens you up to so many false beliefs that you could, like, you could become an anti-vaxxer, and you don't know how to research anything, right?
You're just going to inform your own beliefs. You're going to look for evidence that sort of meshes with what you already believe, which is so. That's the real shame part of it, is that there'll be times where I'll be reading something about philosophy, and it will challenge something I believe, and for a moment, depending on the nature of it, I'll feel a bit, it'll make me stop, and I think, oh, that makes me feel a bit sad, or that's a bit scary, or but then I sort of think, well, yes, but that's okay, because I don't want to hide from truth. I don't want to fool myself into believing something, not only because of what we do, I'll feel a bit hypocritical, but also because I don't want my intelligence to be on autopilot, or I don't want my understanding of things to just say, well, because I'd be just as bad as an anti-vaxxer or something like that. But again, they're using this belief and this way of researching and this way of thinking, and it's having real life, real world negative consequences. So that's why people like us are passionate about it. If it was just a case of the secular way, especially in America, was always successful, then I don't think anybody would really care that somebody was religious, aside from us thinking, oh, it's a bit silly. But if they were keeping their nose out of things, it might not be such a problem. But they're not, and it's getting, from what I see, it's getting increasingly more sort of full on, especially in your governmental side of things. You know, and of course the anti-vaxxer, there was a protest, wasn't there, about people having the right to not vaccinate their children. I think it was in Washington. And there's literally a whole bunch of people sort of, in a manner of speaking, saying we don't care about other people's children. That's not what they were saying, but from anybody with a sense of how vaccinations work and how good they are, could view these people as not caring, because they're willing to, because of their beliefs, possibly harm someone. And it seems insane, but you're right, belief is so strong. And it's even more intriguing, actually. It's funny you should bring up vaccinations, because you know, I haven't bumped into a kid lately that said, oh, I'm against vaccinations. It's always the parents sort of getting that idea. So that people reach adulthood, then they become parents. They may have had a, you know, a thought on whether or not they agree with vaccinations before they had children, but of course when it becomes in the purview of their control, they will or won't. And it's almost like they've taken on a belief in adulthood, which I find intriguing when people do that in a religious sense, because they've grown up perhaps being more critical in their thinking, and then all of a sudden have sort of attached themselves to this doctrine of thought and things like that must go against what they've already experienced. So I find that intriguing when people find religion later on in life.
Yeah.
Because from indoctrination, like you said, it's almost, it redesigns the brain. You know, it makes it makes connections that are very hard to break and in later life. So when people don't vaccinate, I think they have a feeling about something, they run with it, they find out other people feel the same way, and I don't think they are bad people in a sense. I can't imagine that they're thinking, oh, you know, rubbing their hands together saying, who can I murder with measles? I don't think that's what's happening. They feel passionately. They're like, no, I really don't think they're safe. I don't want to put this stuff in my child. As a parent, I can totally understand the protective nature of it. But when there's so much information to the contrary, that's what I think gets people annoyed. It's like, no, just do your research, you know, just don't take away, if your belief is right, if what you're saying is true, take away what you believe just for a day, look at it objectively, then see. But they're not willing to do that, because there might be a little bit in there that's thinking, oh, am I not right? So yeah.
I think part of the problem is, and you get this a lot with religious apologists, as well as anti-vaxxers, and most any like polarizing topic, any thunderous topic, right, is you get information on why the other side's wrong, but you don't actually hear the other side's argument. You usually just get a straw man. I'm getting this a lot with looking into politics some more, especially with talking to Christy Ever and us doing our Leah podcast. Is I didn't know what socialism was, but I knew that it was bad. So bad. It's awful. But it's not. Like, the idea of socialism is actually quite good. It's actually quite fair, and there's no authoritarianism that's just inherently attached to it. Like, you can be a socialist dictatorship, you can be a social democracy, like you could be like a social anarchist. Like, there's different ways to go about it, but you don't hear that. Just like, I think hearing that much is like it'll stop you to make you think. But if you just take one idea and conflate it with anything bad, it really shuts you off, and it just creates straw man. So all I see on, I was talking about this on my last stream too, but like my brother's like Facebook feed and a few of my friends is just why socialism kills people, why this, why that, and how like Bernie Sanders just likes bread lines. I'm just like, no. Like, I saw a 21-second clip of someone interviewing Bernie Sanders 30 years ago, asking him about bread lines, people waiting in line for food. And he says something to the fact, he's like, I think it's great that these people are in line to get food, because in so many countries people just starve and then they cut it off. That's it. Just like, okay, I understand why that looks bad, and I don't want to seem like I'm apologizing for it, because I'm not going to. What he said is fine. There.
Yeah.
There's nuance there. There's nuance because
absolutely.
If someone's standing in line for bread, that means someone's giving out the food. Someone cares enough to try to feed people who can't feed themselves. That's socialism. Right? Or that's just society coming together. That's not necessarily socialism, because socialism is like you paying your taxes and then actually seeing a return on it. Is basically what that is. That's why we have a police force, we have firemen, we have roads, we have infrastructure. So that's one topic that I'm getting into a lot, and that's one thing that I've seen a lot of straw mans for. And it's the same thing with the anti-vaxxer community. Is just like, look, they're putting bad shit in these shots. Okay. One, there is mercury in it, and I think aluminum something sulfate, but it's such a small amount that it doesn't harm you, and two, it's in there to help boost your immune system, and I forget what the other one does. But like, there is a reason, and what I heard, because I was borderline anti-vaxxer when this shit started to happen, is just like, there's just bad stuff in there. You don't need it. That's it. That's the whole argument. And I'm just like, so I was still questioning. You're like, okay, so what is the stuff? Okay, what is the stuff? But I never heard what the stuff is, right? It's just bad.
Like bits of baby in there or something.
Yeah, there's bits of baby in there. And you know what? Yeah, like what there's like, they put like stem cells in some of these shots or something for something or another. So I guess, you know, in a sense, there are bits of baby in some formulas of vaccination. I guess, I think. I could be completely wrong, but I feel like I heard something like about that. And I'm not very keen on this topic, honestly. But I know there's enough information out there to debunk it, and I've looked over enough of it to be like, okay, yeah, that's bullshit, or at least I'm being uninformed from the other side. But the other thing, and this is like my wife said this to me. I'm like, okay, cool, I'm gonna use that because that makes enough sense. And I said this on Facebook yesterday. Is like, okay, let's say you're right. Vaccinations cause autism. Let's say you're right. That's better than fucking polio. Get the fuck over it.
Yeah.
With polio, let's get rid of that and everyone be a little bit autistic. I think that's way better. We can deal with that. Like, that's okay. Like, sometimes you have to weigh the consequences. So
you notice that, you know, a lot of the people that do tend to comment in these sections, and I can't say, obviously, depending on their location, whether or not they've ever suffered the ill effects of polio or another type of disease that we, you know, eradicated or is close to being eradicated in third world countries and places like that. So they don't know the sort of horrors. And I remember my grandfather was terrified of water left in the garden if we'd all been filling the pool up, and he was terrified of it staying out, becoming a bit stagnant even overnight, and us getting back into it again. Because I don't know the pathology of polio, so forgive me, but in his mind, that's one of the ways in which it can spread. I'm sorry, like I said, I'm not a sort of, you know, immunologist or anything like that and know about these things, but he had seen, he was born in the late 30s, I think. So he had seen what polio could do. He went to school with children who, you know, had limbs amputated and so on. So they're the people that lived through it. And it's almost now like they treat polio and the other diseases as the boogeymen. Like, were they really that bad? And it's just like, it must make people who've ever suffered from anything like that, which of course, because it's been on the decline for so long, not many people have. And you know how foolish they must sound. But every now and again, you'll get somebody in the comments who either had a family member, usually an older family member, who had it, or they themselves caught it. Usually elderly people will come in and say, trust me, I would rather the autism side than what happened to it. And just so you take their examples, because they know the sort of horrid effects that these diseases can have. And that's when it bothers me, when they almost say, well, you know, we're supposed to get these things sometimes. Like, there's a difference between saying that and suffering from it yourself. You know, it's you know, that's almost like the ultimate cognitive dissonance. Like, oh, let's bring them back and see if we can, you know, let's see if our immune systems can evolve. So, well, no, they obviously couldn't. That's why we needed modern medicine, and of course they'll take it or leave it, because they'll have medicine in other forms. So it's a bit sort of foolish, really. But when it comes to the politics side of things, you know, hyperbole and sort of rhetoric has been used since, you know, the Romans and things like that. In terms of politics, they would state something that sounds so outlandish, and then it would cause the other side to and it's basically a distraction. But the thing that we have now more than any time in human history is the ability to research for ourselves. That can be difficult, because obviously places like, I wouldn't say social media is the best place to do it, although there's some interesting conversations occurring. You know, there's the aspect of fake news, and then there'll be websites set up for or against something. Just do your research, and you've got literally the world's information at your fingertips. You know, at any other time we can check on what things that you know, what people are saying, whether or not it's true, whether it's just hyperbole, or it's just, you know, trying to, you know, be needlessly provocative. It's, you know, there's not really an excuse now for just blindly following someone. And sometimes it'll feed into people's, you know, politics do feed down into people's livelihoods, and they'll say, well, you know, I didn't feel my business did well under Obama, so I'm going to go for Trump. So you've got to understand the aspect of the everyman. You know, they've got to vote not only with their minds, but with their hearts and with the thought of the future, and that aspect. But in terms of people just blindly following things, or saying, like you said, these sort of clips where socialism is bad and things like that, so there's very few things that are completely intrinsically that bad. There's, like you said before, that's why you call yourself grey skeptic, because a lot of the time there's a grey area. There's so much involved in something. You know, I can see the benefits in communism. Oh God, you know, but it doesn't work, you know, in right. My mind, what I've seen. You know, it's a great thing in theory, not in practice. But nobody, I wouldn't call myself a communist. I wouldn't call myself an anti-communist, because I see merits in it. Yeah. Of course, there's no such thing as a good murder, but then we have capital punishment. So do you see what I mean? You can take something and say, well, there's for, there's against, and for people to use it, and politicians know this. They're pretty much taught it as soon as they decide. Makes for a good soundbite, and that's why politicians, like anybody, and certainly people like us, need to be clear on what we're saying, because you're speaking to such a wide audience that one segment is going to think this way about what you said, another section of society is going to think that way. Be as clear as you can, because that's not sexy, and politicians love to just rile everybody up.
It sounds sexy to me. I like it.
Yeah. Politicians will be politicians, but I think it's up to us to sort of say, well, you know, well, most of what comes out of Trump's mouth is just ridiculous. But, you know, even people like Obama, who I liked a lot, you know, I can say that there's some things I didn't agree with and some things I did agree with. And you see what's happened? You know, the world hasn't imploded for having a sort of not middle of the road sort of opinion, but having this opinion.
Are you trying to tell me Obama wasn't God?
Huh?
I said, are you trying to tell me Obama wasn't God?
No. afraid not.
I don't know if we could talk.
Exactly. The one thing I will say for Trump is that he's probably got more from just what I've seen, you know, got more people talking about politics than perhaps ever before, and becoming interested in what, you know, certain aspects of the government are for, and the legislation side of things. So he's almost got people so sort of riled up about it that they're looking into it to be able to bolster what they think. So that's a good thing, but they're still going into their camps. They're not thinking about the other side, really. It's just, you know, you're my enemy, you think this way. I think on the internet, obviously, can make that seem very much like that's what's occurring on a street level, but I don't think necessarily people can't not work with each other if they, you know, one's a Democrat, one's a Republican. I think on a daily basis, I'd like to think people get along, but, you know, the internet is everybody's emotional dumping ground. So it bears the brunt, yeah.
No, it's fine. And we're hitting on a lot of topics, so
yeah. Sorry, I'm not
no, it's fine. I don't want to backtrack too much.
No.
But I like a lot of what we're saying, so I'll try to backtrack just a little bit quickly, and we'll see where it takes us. As far as politics go, when you're trying to learn about them, right, and try to like figure out what the news is, and figure out what is good and what's bad, I think the best thing to do is try to ignore opinions, right? Like if you're watching CNN or Fox News or BBC, cool, but pay attention to the information they're giving you and see if it's full or not. Like if they're just giving you a clip of something and you feel passionate about that clip, find the rest of the video. Step one.
Yeah.
Two, if they're giving you just a whole bunch of opinion, like how you should feel about it, which Fox does a lot, then maybe don't watch that. Maybe just don't watch it anymore. I think there are news bias charts on Google that are super duper easy to find, and it's pretty easy to see which is more accurate. Not saying any are perfect, but there's some that have like Associated Press and like CBS News, and here, like right here at the top in the middle, showing they're pretty unbiased, and they're not, and it's actual like just news. And it's the closer you get down to the bottom is opinion, and the middle is like actual facts, right? And the further you get down there, like you get like CNN kind of close to the middle, but a little to the left. And then Fox is just a little bit lower, and more to the right, obviously. My right. Sorry for anyone. And then you have like Alex Jones, InfoWars, way down here on the bottom. And like, okay, that seems pretty accurate. And the other ones that I find have InfoWars at the top as only fucking fact. Like, okay, so I don't think I can trust that one. So it's really easy to get an idea of where you can get facts or something closer to facts, right? And then you can use a little bit of philosophy. Ask yourself some questions. Do I believe this and why? Right? So you really do need to be a skeptic when you're looking at politics. Even if you're watching my other show, League of Extraordinary Atheists for Humanism. Go subscribe. Like we share our opinions a lot, but Christy and I, we spend time researching. We write a script. We try to get the facts. We try to grab some numbers where we can, and then we try to actually tell you some facts, and then we give our opinions. We try to keep them a little bit separate, so you know that you know how we feel about it, because we want to tell you how we feel about it, but also like we're actually giving you some food here, like we're actually throwing you some meat. Another thing I was going to say real quick, and I think I was going to say it twice because it's very relevant, is Anthony Magnabosco. Have you watched any of his stuff yet?
No, the name is familiar though. No, I can't say that I have.
He's the one who is really bringing SE, street epistemology interview for the community. And Drew of Genetically Modified Skeptic and his friend Dan, Objectively Dan.
Yeah, truth wanted. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. That's what all of that's about. Is the street epistemology, and Anthony Magnabosco is the one who kind of brought Objectively Dan out of Christianity. There's actually a video. He has it online of the first time he talked to Dan, and he was still a Christian. And then he contacted him 9 months later. And they got back together, and he told him he's an atheist now, and he wants to learn what he's doing. It's an amazing, amazing video. Everyone should watch it. And the reason I'm bringing this up, especially in our conversation, is because he just stands on a street, more or less, or just like on like a path where people like to go jog.
Yeah.
And he asks them if they want to talk about something about beliefs. And he has like a little whiteboard and some bottles of water, and he has a GoPro and like another camera. Like he has a nice little setup, and he's very friendly because like you're trying to talk to strangers, right?
Yeah, you have to be friendly.
About their beliefs.
Yeah.
So he does it like a little 4-minute interview, and if they're fine, most people want to go on for like 20 or 30 minutes. But he asks them tough questions, like, okay, so why do you believe that? Okay, faith. Great. What does faith mean? Because I hear different definitions. And then if they ask, well, what do you think it means? Like, oh, I mean, well, I'm interviewing you. I'd really like to know your definition, so we can just work off of that. He puts it back on them every single time. That's what street epistemology does. Okay, so what is faith? That is the question.
The Socratic method sort of thing.
Say what?
It's like the Socratic method of sort of, just, yeah.
So I think that's brilliant. And whenever we're talking, like during a debate, even like I haven't had many debates yet, but that's one thing that I want to bring up is when someone says, faith or talks about why they believe in the Bible, just break it back down for them. Like, okay, so why the Bible? Whatever. I go, okay, the Bible says so. Okay, get it back down to faith, and then ask them what faith is, and then hold them to that standard definition that they're giving you. And they can't. They almost never can. They changed the meaning of it like 2 or 3 times. Because faith means whatever you need it to. And when you point that out to someone, it really starts to shake their foundations. I see a lot on that channel. And that's good. Because if you have a false belief or a belief that's true but not for the right reasons, you should know. If what you believe is true, that's good and fine, but believe it for the right reasons.
Yeah, like justified true belief. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So that's my rant. It's my rant. So back to you. It's your turn.
No, I did. I came across it. Obviously, I try to watch as many content creators as I can.
Hard to.
It is. Well, there's so many wonderful channels out there, and of course, you're all doing sort of like different shows and things like that. But of course, to me, as much as that is research in a sense, I want to make sure I have a some more learned understanding of things. So I find myself a lot of the time, spare time, researching. Yeah. So that when I eventually cross paths with some of these creators, then I feel like I'm on their sort of level in understanding. But I came charity drive.
I'm sorry, I lost that whole last sentence.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I came across Dan. I think he was doing something with Drew, the ex-Muslims of North America charity drive. There's a few people on there. They had lots of guests. Shannon was on there, and I came across his stuff, and I thought, this might be the way to go on a street level. We're doing our thing online, but on a conversational level, in real life, you can often get deeper, and people aren't so quick with the snark and aren't so quick to say blah, 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 and then block you. So you could perhaps have more concrete conversations, in person. And he's doing it in such a way that it's almost sort of letting them express themselves and then questioning. So they're not saying they're not butting heads. You know, they are. He is trying to get to the sort of the basis of what they believe, and he's doing it in a way that doesn't seem intrusive or attacking or visceral. So it's yeah, I think it can be harder to do it, like I said, online, because you're not really conversing with anyone in a sense. You're putting out sort of things, but anybody watching it can then see, like, for example, body language and things like that of the person, and you can, the nuance, the nuance. You don't often get the nuance of real life online, even when it is, you know, real life we're showing. So yeah, I think that's probably a really good tool in the atheist arsenal, is street epistemology, and I want to look into it more myself. I don't know how I'd be in real time in terms of, because it's essentially a form of debate, isn't it? You know, I don't know how I could be in real time. I think even Drew says that, you know, he'll often critique people like Jordan Peterson, or he'll point out certain people and the way they debate and what's wrong with it and stuff like that. But even he said, you know, I don't want to say that I could do what they do in real time. I make videos and I write scripts. So even he, with all his knowledge, says, you know, it takes a particular person to be able to do that. And yeah, and I think it's just a friendly approach. I think a lot of people with beliefs aren't bad people.
No.
You know, but it's getting them to question it, and in a non-forceful way. And I think that's a brilliant idea. But we're still allowed to talk about it, and we're still allowed to get passionate about it, especially when it's affecting people. So I think there's room for us too. You know, and I don't think anybody would sort of deny me my own little section of the internet to be able to express what I'm expressing. But at least I do say, you know, I'm new to this, and I'm, you know, I don't come from a religious family or religious background. So for some people, they might be able to come at me and say, well, then you don't know what you're talking about. You haven't read the Bible front to back and things like that. And I say, well, perhaps not, but you know, I'm just seeing it from this aspect, and I have essentially a right to, and I have a right to speak on it. You know, but you also have the right to not watch it. So
yeah,
you know, yeah,
you're not forcing it down anyone's throat.
No, like I said, we're not knocking on doors.
Right. And one thing that I'd like to point out for any religious viewers, this is something that would have made me think just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Is like looking at you, or looking at any mild-mannered atheist that we know of. You seem you seem a decent person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you aren't damned. Like, you seem like you're like you're doing okay too. And like, it doesn't look like you are any further ahead or behind than I am in life. And you don't have God. That's kind of strange, isn't it? Like, you say that you get all these blessings all the time, like when you're Christian, like, oh, thank God for this, thank God for that. Like, he's watching out for every single thing you do. And when really you're just living a normal life, and as long as you go to work every day and you have some kind of ambition, you're loving yourself. Like, you have goals, you have drive, and you are doing it for yourself. And it really takes away from that. And I think that's just something we don't really point out enough in our conversations, probably because it's so I don't know, lame. It's so easy.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate contradiction, but people will still say about faith. And I think it's funny you should point that out, because I was watching, it's probably a couple of years old now, but I was watching an old episode of The Atheist Experience with Ray Comfort had phoned in, and it was a special show of them just talking to each other. And of course, Matt Dillahunty was, you know, I think he was involved in the Baptist church for a long time, wasn't he? So he knows his stuff, you know, scripturally and otherwise. And he's Ray Comfort was sort of saying to him, you know, you weren't a true believer then, if you've gotten to this point of not believing now. And it's like, well, who gauges that? Because Matt said, he said, I felt it. I felt that I loved the Lord, and I felt this with all my heart and all this. I'm paraphrasing, but you know. And then Ray Comfort said, "Well, no, you can't have been." And it's just like, you know, you must see how foolish that sounds when you're trying to say, you know, who's more Christian than another person, when it's something subjective, it's an intrinsic feeling. You know, it's it's just a bizarre, and Ray Comfort's obviously somebody who's in the public spotlight, and I think for anyone on that level, any of the apologetic side of people that are on that level must have come across some information that made them doubt, but they're so sort of involved in what they do that I don't think they'd let it show. I don't want to say that their faith isn't strong, but I can't believe on, not even on a small cognitive level, that something hasn't slipped in and made them think. But then that is, like you said, blind faith. It's a perfect analogy, because even in my research, I was looking at the basis of Christianity, and they were sort of discussing, you know, what it is, and at its most sort of basic level, and it kept saying the word unquestioning faith, and it was almost as if it was written as a virtue to be unquestioning. And I just thought, well, no, that's to me, that's not part of the human condition. I just thought, why do they seem like that's a good thing? So you're already, they've sort of made, right, don't question things. So of course what you read or what you then sort of let influence your life is going to influence it greatly, because you're not going to question it. And it's in there, it's in the words, it's in the sort of, you know, don't, and of course it's not even just about the unquestioning, it's the punishment if you do. So it's like the worst insurance policy in the whole world, because you can't get out of it, but it's not, can't be comfortable staying in it if you have any sort of.
And hello, welcome back. Sorry. Yeah, and just that whole idea that, okay, well, you weren't really a Christian. You didn't actually feel it, or you never read the Bible, or any of that. No true Scotsman fallacy bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is, to me,
I'm surprised he used it, because it's like a base level sort of argument, isn't it, from apologetics? Or you can't have been a true Christian. It's like, well, who are you to decide that sort of thing? It's so it can easily be shot down. It's kind of foolish of him to use it, but
yeah, and I think so, but also he doesn't. He doesn't, because I mean it's base level dishonesty, is what it is. But
yeah,
that's just such a true fact to him. And Ken Ham as well. That I mean, if you don't believe it now, then you never really believed it, because once Jesus is in your heart, then never goes away. He's much too powerful for that, because to admit differently is kind of to admit defeat. Because I understand the opposite is, okay, then why couldn't God keep me? Like, why is he so not powerful enough and loving enough to where he couldn't convince me that, one, he was real, or two, he was good? And I think that's a scary, disarming thought for them. Because I get sidetracked really easily. And I'm trying to put stuff in the description really quick. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, I've often thought, what does that even mean? Take Jesus into your heart.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a funny one, isn't it? And I mean, I get what it means, because, like, obviously there's a little bit of nuance there. You know, like, fix yourself. Stop it, camera. So sorry, and
I thought you were trying to sort of like a demon possession thing, you know, an exorcism.
I got your nose. I was gonna say, this is why I have atheist flashbacks, as one, because I get to learn about other sects of Christianity and other religions. Because I even had Zara K on recently, which is fantastic. I wanted to know some Muslim beliefs.
Yeah.
But also then, like, it's really hard to say that you were never a Christian if I can interview this person as a Christian or whatever they were. And back to the nuance, because I jump back and forth like a jackrabbit, Mac rabbit.
You should have called your channel that.
Say what?
You should have called your channel Mac Rabbit. No, I love racism. That could be your alter ego, though, Mac Rabbit.
Yes, and just Jesus in your heart. It's. I understand, like you love him like you love another person, except more, which is I think is weird because he's not real, but it's it's all faith based. That's the problem. Is like how much do you love Santa Claus? How much do you love the idea of Santa Claus? I mean, like Superman's in my heart. I can say that, and I feel like you understand what I mean, right? But the thing is, I don't believe in Superman. I like this fictional character's values a lot. Does that make sense?
It does, and that's the difference, is that you and I can be inspired by a story, even a religious story. They can be very inspiring.
Yes.
But you because we don't have that blind faith, we also don't take it literally. We can see the nuance and we can see the context in the way we're seeing it. The difference is we don't hold these people, these beings up as a moral exemplar of how to live. I love Superman. I do, and essentially he is like the ultimate person because he gives of himself, and he's got all these amazing qualities. But I also don't believe that he flies. So do you see what I mean? I know he's not real, but he has qualities that I admire. But you could literally say that about anyone, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, but even Adolf Hitler, was a good orator. I've been reading about him lately where they actually used to make him seem like he was actually doing a better job at speeches than he was by the camera angles and things like that, which is really interesting because, of course, you see this footage and you see these amazing sort of rallies that he used to hold. But he would actually be coached and things like that on how to talk and things. But you could at least say for him, he knew how to get people riled up. He knew the words to say. I'm not saying that that's a good thing in terms of what he was saying, but you can see that. You can see that he was a good orator, and he got to the passion of what he thought people's problems were. So if you can say that about somebody as awful as Hitler, you can make anything into something to follow. And again with Islam, he's Allah and God. These things are moral exemplars, and not only are they contradictory by their very nature. God in the Old Testament was a nasty piece of work. You got nicer in the New Testament, but even that sort of has contradictions, and he has all these omni attributes. But it wouldn't matter so much if people said, he had his good times, he had his bad times. We're made in his image, so we see him as this sort of. Sometimes I see him as the ultimate being, and then other times he's just like us. Again, sort of contradictions. But, if people weren't saying he is a standard to live up to, it wouldn't be so bad because we wouldn't put so much stock and find the contradictions because we'd say, well, he's human, I can't believe I'm about to say this again, but even Donald Trump must have some sort of positive aspects. It doesn't even have to be a positive, negative thing. It can just be that, I don't think everybody is intrinsically bad. There are very few people I think who are just completely, to the core evil. But then evil is a standard we put against, yes, the morality, yeah, exactly, the morality of somebody. And that can be, a relative thing depending on the time you're living in. But again, neo-Nazis are obviously putting Adolf Hitler on a pedestal, but, religion itself is a far more powerful, overreaching sort of thing. And I think with you did a great video, obviously, on the Catholic Church, the cover-up and the sexual abuse. Is it Pittsburgh over in America?
Philadelphia.
Sorry, there's so many coming out now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they had some in Pittsburgh as well, but it was
yes.
I think it was the over
like
the area or whatever.
Yeah.
It was a Philadelphia grand jury.
Right, the
Yeah,
diocese
it
sort
did
of
cover
area.
some
Yeah.
Pittsburgh.
Well, I don't know if you saw, but the Pope was in a speech, I think, sometime in the last week, had been quoted as saying that God didn't know that people were being abused. And I don't know if he meant at a particular time or a particular place. And I just thought, one, how bloody convenient. Two, are you kidding me? You know what? But he can judge people for using contraception. He's in your bedrooms the whole time, but he didn't see one of his own sort of soldiers doing these awful things. And that's I think what gets me with organized religion. It's the sheer hypocrisy of it. You know, they should be on earth. They should be the moral exemplars of what we see Jesus or God to be. And whilst every human, you know, has failings, they are, you know, people look up to them, and they are sort of let into people's lives more so than you would let perhaps a doctor or something else, somebody else of an authoritative figure into your life. So they have almost the ultimate access to these children, and that's what makes it that much more sickening, that these children look up to them and feel safe and feel secure, and you know, this is what's happening. That's what's sickening. And the fact that the Vatican and the Pope, they're arguing against it, and it's like, just hold your hands up, man. Just and rid what you consider to be a pure thing of these evils, because you're just going to make people turn away. You know,
Yeah.
It's happening on such a massive scale, they can't deny it anymore. And it's just, and for people like us, it's, if we like want to shake Catholics, go, stop going to church. You know, it's that crazy.
Shake the whole church.
Yeah, and I think it'd be awful if I was a Catholic, and you know, little old me in England, and this guy in Rome that for some reason wears Prada. I don't know why God's emissary on earth has to wear such expensive clothes, but there you go. Jesus wouldn't have done, but whatever. But you know, he's saying this stuff, and then as a Catholic, I feel representative of my religion, depending on how devout I am. I would think, God, you know, as a normal person, I think, God, this is awful that I have to sort of, I'm almost put under that umbrella. And that would feel awful, because there's loads of people who are religious, who are lovely people. And my neighbours are religious, and they're lovely people.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them for anything that Christianity does, but you know, they must feel, being a Michael Jackson fan is I use it before, but it's a good analogy, because of course I have to find myself defending or at least discussing him a lot, especially with this new HBO documentary coming out. So I feel it myself. I feel like I'm an extension of my feelings about him, and feel the need to defend or feel the need to, you know, say anything against him. Again, I try to do it objectively, but I do feel it. I think, oh God, you know. So I do understand. They've got to understand that there's such more far-reaching problems than PR. You know, that's what it seems like. It just seems like they're sort of burying their heads in the sand. And the fact that they're not only are they making a point of letting these things happen, moving a lot of the people around that are doing it instead of letting the legal system do its damn job, but they're also trying to restrict names getting out and files to prove that they did all this. I mean, if any other organization on the earth did this with this, you know, much further, they'd be absolute outrage.
Yeah.
It's maddening. It's literally like the mafia on a bigger scale.
Yeah, and there's so much more that the Catholic Church has done. Like this, like obviously this isn't the first time this kind of thing has been revealed.
No.
But also in Ireland, I forget, Tov. Is that?
Yes, yeah, I think it's how it's pronounced. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's fucking devastating. I think I remember the number: 796 child bodies were found, just basically like a mass grave or whatever. That's so sick. Like it's disgusting, and I guess God fell asleep then too. But and like just besides just how could you still believe in God after that? Because that's an argument from emotion. I could be okay with someone saying, But still, it's utter bullshit that we would allow the Catholic Church to have any authority over anything after that. Like, we fought wars over like a single woman, but we'll let thousands of children die, like of starvation, even just in like Yemen. So like, what are we doing? Like, where are our moral standards? And I don't understand how any religious person, just for like believing in God and the Bible, can call the moral high ground. And what we were saying about Superman and really any politicians, or even like Hitler, what we have on any religious person are like one up here is we don't believe in it. We don't have a faith. Like, we don't say that this is a supreme being that we believe in. No, we have the freedom of saying, I like Bernie Sanders. He's my favorite politician. But Tulsi Gabbard is better on foreign policy. He's not God. He's not perfect. He's not the standard. I love Superman. But also there's parts of, or there's certain things about Barry Allen or Bruce Wayne that I like a little bit better. Like, there's no perfect being, and I can pick and choose because there's no perfect being. I can pick and choose because I can create my own moral standard, and we can also, as a society, create a moral standard. That's how we can do it, because they always ask, all right, well, then what's your moral standard? Okay, what's your basis for that? Like, well, society and what they think. It's kind of majority rule. It's democracy. And if you have a gold standard like that, like a single God standard, then you are held to that. And when they fuck up, you have to make up apologetics for it, or you have to accept it, because that is your supreme standard. You have no, like, you can't do anything else with it. But we can condemn that. We can take the moral high ground, and instead of either shifting the blame or moving the goalpost. And I think that's something great that we have. That's a freedom that we get for not being religious. I don't know how you feel about it.
Well, no, I think in a sense, having such a wide sort of aspect of beliefs, morality and stuff like that, and the idea that we as skeptics question everything can make it seem like there's so much input. And I find myself, although I do try to question everything, I do find myself following certain trains of thought and agreeing with them. Then they'll get challenged and I'll follow a different one. And you can't help but get yourself attached to certain ideals. Obama, another case, I thought he was great, and I was genuinely sad when, well, even more so because Trump took over, but I was genuinely sad when I realized, his time was up and stuff. But then, I didn't know as much about him. And then when I looked into it, I thought, okay, well, he could have done this and da, da, da. And of course, we're putting all this onus on one man, but that's his job, sort of thing. But, it does leave you incredibly sort of static in your thinking. And because you not only believe it on a cognitive level, but on an emotional level, it's incredibly hard to break. So you justify it. And what do they say? You can't hold, was it false knowledge? Knowledge is either correct or incorrect. You can have what you consider a justified true belief. So you take what you think is right. And that's essentially what they're doing.
Yeah.
But they're obviously trying to make other people see it their way. So there's that aspect to it. But yes, this whole sort of moral high ground. And I just think, like you said about the nuns, if any other organization had that in their history of that happening, what would the religious people think? If Pastafarians were burying children under their convents, I don't know what they would call it, they'd have something to say about it.
Yeah. So
why is it different when it's them? Why should, because something has reverence because it's old, it's a respected institution by those who follow it, why do they have a get out of jail free card?
Right. And
And
this
I
is
can't get my head around it. I can't understand why they honestly think they have better moral high ground than me, somebody who is an atheist. And I think I have great morals. You know, I don't want to hurt anyone. Don't want to be hurt. I understand that there's consequences to my actions, and I don't need to be terrified of hell or judgment because I'm terrified of going to jail. I'm terrified of hurting people, and not only hurting people in an emotional sense, but bearing the brunt of the consequences that are far-reaching and you know are ongoing from that.
yes.
But it's so much more powerful a public relations tool to say, no, actually, you're going to burn in hell. You know, there's
How is that moral?
exactly. Well, no, they're changing their mind now, aren't they? I think I spoke about annihilationism in one of my videos, that they're actually saying, well, you know, we're not too sure it's actual and literal hell, but it might just be where you're not loved by God, which doesn't have as much sort of power to it, but sounds nicer. I think, well, hang on a minute, you've scared a lot of people in the past, and like you said, wars have been fought, policies in you know sort of regal governments have been upheld because of these aspects of religion, and now you're saying that hell might not exist. Then what the hell do those people die for? It's such a tragedy.
Right.
You know?
The same thing with
you can't change your mind every now and again because it suits the current sort of level of thinking. Because then what good is it? What truth do you really hold if you can change it and adapt it that easily?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I completely agree. So it's a funny thing, faith and apologetics, because I feel like I want to say absolutely no consistency, but there is consistency. Obviously, like there's arguments that have been around for a long time, and also it consistently changes. It's consistently tweaked to seem truer to more and more people, and that's I mean that's just a lie to me. But trying to think, I was going to say something else and I forgot. Thought thought in progress. Um, it was gosh darn. Okay, you said how does the Catholic Church get away with this? Because if it was any other organization, right, or any other non-religious organization, because the JWs get away with this, and so do Mormons, the same type of stuff. Sorry about the traffic. It's starting to.
No. There's special effects.
So I think, and I want everyone's opinion on this. This is why I'm kind of prefacing it just a little bit. This is a newer thought to me. We have separation of church and state, at least over here, and I know over there you guys have that too a bit, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So is it still, because they're protected by this kind of thing because they have their own policies, and we can't really go in and we can't really go in and like fucking fix anything or just fucking go arrest the Pope, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if we can arrest the Pope. I don't know if that's a thing. I feel like I should know that, but
well, no. You pick a decent example because the Vatican City is essentially its own sovereign country. Yeah. So the laws there aren't stipulated to the rest of Rome and the outside areas. So that's quite convenient, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? So my thought is, though, with separation of church and state, isn't it kind of like conflicting itself? Like when we separate it, so like we don't get involved in their stuff, they don't get involved in our stuff, but we can't do our jobs. Like the Justice Department can't actually do its job because of ex-religious whatever, like X or Y. So like, isn't that religion getting in the way of the state when they break the laws and we can't do anything about it? Like I lost the way I was going to say it, but I feel like someone might have some really good input here.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's probably a good argument in there somewhere to be like, all right, this only goes so far, and it's actually um, churches breaking laws is crossing the line. So now we can cross the line to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. Do you have something you want to say on that? Because I have a question from the chat.
Okay, well, yeah, this is the thing. I think when things become in the public sphere, it can get a lot messier. And it's not to say that, you know, any institution doesn't have the right to deal with things in house. Even, you know, when you think of the army, they have their own military police and their own system of, you know, not necessarily a legal system, but more a sort of jurisprudence of it, of what happens. So it's not to say that the Catholic Church can't govern itself, but when it comes to the legalities of things like physical abuse and things like that, they could deal with things like fraud in house and things, but anything that, I think once you reach outside of the collective of the clergy, and it starts affecting your followers, and it's certainly affecting those who are the most innocent in all of this, the children, I think you've lost any sort of understanding of trying to deal with it in-house. Because essentially you're then giving them carte blanche to be able to do anything, because you're saying, well, no, we technically can't sort of investigate. And what does that say? What does that say to believers, and what does that say to these children, that but for the fact that they happen to have been brought up in this particular religion, somebody in that religion has done something awful to them, but they are protected. Somebody else did it, they wouldn't be so protected. And how nightmarish must that situation be? But not only that, but when we really think about it, that person isn't any more intrinsically special in that, okay, he holds a position. But again, it all comes down to, we don't know if this is all real. We don't know if God exists. And this person has been given this power to do something horrible to me, and it's all based on possibly, you know, a lie, or not a lie, but something that somebody's made up. You know, I could make up a church now, and in 1,000 years' time, my clergyman could perform horrible things in my name, either knowing or not knowing that I made it all up. And then they'd be protected. That's how ridiculous it sounds to me. So have your in-house sort of legal system, if you will, but not when it affects children, and not when it does so on a physical you know, level like that. Yeah, I think I've explained myself. I think I know what I mean.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. And you asked. Damn it! And as soon as I said you asked, I forgot what you asked. How?
Oh, you did have somebody in the live chat.
Oh yes, that too. But now I have to get this thought out.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nacha. Wait.
Really talking a lot. Sorry.
Wildheart666. Thank you. He said that he just subscribed to Topic Thunder. Consider me thunderstruck.
Awesome. I picked the right name.
You did. You said, what does that do to a child or a person who's like looking at the situation from the outside or inside, really? Inside, really. Like when we can't fix the problems in the church, and like, or it doesn't matter. What it says to them, I think, and I'll be surprised if I get a lot of pushback on this, but what it says to them is that God is the ultimate authority. God is the ultimate authority. What happens here doesn't matter, right? And that's kind of sick, because as an atheist, although I'm a nihilist, like an existential nihilist, I like what happens here does matter, because like
we have to live.
It does. We have to live. So and this is all we get. And like I think this matters. People around me think it matters. So hey, it must matter. And your false belief doesn't just wash that away. You can't. I feel like this is part of that net negative that I talk about with religion. It takes away our authority. It takes away our responsibility to fix problems, because this doesn't matter. Well, God's the ultimate authority. Oh, it's in God's hands, and that's utter bullshit. One, but two, it's just it's misleading for so many people, and it keeps people disengaged, especially here in the United States. Like, I have talked to real people who've really said, well, like, I don't get involved in politics because, I mean, like, I don't have any control, right? Like, my voice doesn't actually matter. And also, if you're a Trump fan, especially, you feel like God is leading the nation, right? He's got this. You don't have to participate. And I know Jehovah's Witnesses. You can correct me in the chat if you want to, not sure, but you can't, because I know a little bit about your form of faith. Is that they don't vote? They're not supposed to. You're not supposed to get involved in politics because it's worldly, and you don't need it. God's got this one. He's got it. Or if it's going to hell, it's because it's the end times. It doesn't matter. This is supposed to happen. And it's just a whole fucking rabbit hole.
It goes back to that whole sort of hypocrisy side of things. It's just like, well, the clergy, the people who are meant to be these moral examples of God's work on earth, who we should all look up to, can do these awful things, but God help you if you wear jeans in church. I'm using that as a funny example because it is.
Yeah.
I think I got that from Drew. GM Skeptic put something like that on Twitter the other night, that they weren't allowed to wear jeans or something in his church.
Yeah.
And he said, really, that matters, but not messing with with children. And again, from the outside, you're like, please see how crazy this is, but people can't. And if it's something uncomfortable like that, like the fact that so many of these people are being found guilty or it's coming out, it must be incredibly hard to sort of continue to justify things. And on a base level, like I said, a Catholic person, I don't blame them for what their religion does, but I think we must register on some level that they must feel foolish on some level to sort of make it sound like the ultimate thing, and not only something they follow, but they find it wrong that anybody follows any other path. Well, yours isn't that great either. So
you're right.
Yeah.
Again, just where's that standard at?
Exactly. And why is it one rule for them, another rule for another? And it's very I say it's God's mafia on earth, but it's true, because they'll make stuff up as they go along, and bad PR, they don't like bad PR, and it's like, screw PR. You're supposed to be the ultimate level of moral standards to follow, and here you are sort of hiding facts and attacking victims, not only in the sense of what they've been through, but are now trying to silence them in one way or another. And one of the ways they do that is obviously they're very powerful and they have a lot of money, which again it's just so obvious. It's almost like, remove the fact that they all wear these sort of frocks and things like that and they pray. You could almost put in a sort of evil conglomerate in its the mind of it doesn't come into it for me. If anything, it makes it worse on their part because of the hypocrisy. So yeah, it's a messy situation, and I can only hope that, of all the horrible things that happen to these poor people, that it does wake people up and it makes them sort of really think about what they believe or what they're willing to put up with coming from these moral exemplars. Because if they're wrong on their level, then they can perhaps start to doubt their own beliefs and their own way of following things. Because if the Bible can be used, or God's mouthpiece on earth can say, oh, God didn't know that was happening, then what's to say that the most devout Catholic person can't then live a more freer life. Say, well, then I don't feel like I need to, you know, not do this. And a Jewish person can say, although they don't have the same sort of thing going on, as far as I know, in their world, you know, say, well, I will work on the Sabbath. Then, you know, they can start to question things. So, yeah, it's a horrible situation, and I think they are doing such a bad job of dealing with it. They really are, especially with what the Pope said.
Yeah.
Didn't know what was going on. Oh.
Yeah, I think so. And one thing I just want to say in general on standards and hypocrisy is I came up with this cute little saying years ago. Like, if I'm being a hypocrite, that happens. Like, I don't always reach my own standards, right? I don't always practice what I preach.
Absolutely.
But my rebuttal to that is be better.
Yeah.
Be better. Like, if you have a problem with me being a hypocrite, cool. You can point it out, but don't act like I'm your standard. Okay?
Yeah.
Don't act like whoever you're talking to, they're the gold standard. It's fine to point out some hypocrisy, but like, one, don't be a dick about it, and two, just be better. If it bothers you, be better than me. That's fine. If everyone around me is better than me, it'll make me feel a little bad. Yeah, sure, and maybe that's your point, but I don't know, just fucking be better.
Yeah, but
be better.
We're seeing a sort of interesting dynamic with people like Jordan Peterson now, and essentially anybody you sort of admire. Again, Michael Jackson fan, but the level of hero worship for people like Jordan Peterson, and we've spoken about this before. I find him an interesting enough fellow. I think he's got some interesting things to say. I don't agree with them all. I agree with some. Right. But, you know, you'll get these people who are so, like, if you say anything negative about him, not even negative, but just critical, you know, what we're all allowed to do, and they will jump on it. And because they feel like he's helped them and things like that, they say, well, we're not trying to take anything away from you. We're just pointing out what we think, sort of thing. So why does your opinion sort of counter mine? You know, but hero worship can occur at any level, at any time. You know, we can say, oh, people believe the Bible because they were sheep herders and things like that back in the day, but they still believe it now. And people become Christians every day. And you can hero worship, and it's especially strange now because we can see, you know, Jordan Peterson making a speech, or even people like Donald Trump who will literally lie in his speeches. Lies that you can check that they're lies, you know, they can check on the facts, and people will still worship him. So there's something in the psyche that to be able to sort of, it's a cognitive dissonance, obviously, but to be able to separate, what do they call it? It's like the halo and horns effect, where you see somebody in a certain light and that's the only way you can see them. And in a negative connotation as well, if you've had a negative feeling about somebody, it's very hard to sort of break from that. Yeah, so I don't think people always do it consciously. I think it's a very interesting psychological thing.
Right.
So, I think
it has to do with cognitive dissonance again, and what you said about the halo and horns. Forgot the other word. But I think Donald Trump is one of the best examples, or again, words. He's like God right now, right? To some people, he's like God. Like, I've even heard people and like seen memes of people saying, "Look, if Jesus came down today and said Donald Trump is a liar, I would be questioning Jesus." It was like, really? Wow.
Oh, we are screwed. We are just royally screwed.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
That's the thing, is that, like, you know, we speak of Jesus as obviously a historical figure, so we can't be sure of certain aspects of him. We can have the discussions, but we can't have definitive proof in you know, in a lot of things regarding him. But with Donald Trump, you can check these things out. Somebody could say something like, you know, he's not that great a businessman. Look how many businesses that went bankrupt, or you know, that, you know, he had issues with. You can go check that information out. You know, it's you have when you have the access to the information for or against, and still have this narrow-minded thing. That's quite crazy, I think, because it's not like it's guesswork. We can check. You can still have an opinion on it, and you can have a bias, but the facts are there. The information is there. And that's terrifying. Wow.
Yeah.
He's definitely not the new Jesus.
It's what now?
He's definitely not the new Jesus.
No.
No.
Oh,
Jesus is somewhat of a likable character, you know.
Have you seen Republican Jesus or GOP Jesus?
No, there's so many. Do you mean on Twitter? Because there's so many different gods and Jesuses and stuff.
Right.
They're hilarious.
It's actually a YouTube video, and it's flipping hilarious. It's stuff like I can't even quote it right now. It's okay, because I don't want to not do it justice. But it's definitely worth watching. It's really, really funny. It's just basically if Jesus was a Republican like today, it's very contradictory to what people say Jesus is.
Yeah.
It's cute. But I do have that question.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Is from Not Jaw Witness. He wants to know how TT feels about the latest news on Down Goes Pell, and I'll go ahead and say real quick, if you still don't mind.
Sure.
Everyone, this is Kelly Thunder. Call her Kelly instead of potentially Titty. That would be not great.
You put it in their heads now. Oh,
it was there.
This would be the seminal moment that it all started to unravel.
But yeah, so Kelly, how do you feel about Down Goes Pell? Hashtag Down Goes Pell.
Oh, I'd love to punch that bastard right in the face. I tweeted out the other day.
That was sexy.
I got it wrong. I'd seen him on an Australian panel show, some footage on YouTube, and I thought it was Christopher Hitchens he was discussing it with, and it wasn't. He was on with Dawkins, I think. Christopher Hitchens had previously been on the show, and that's what made the connection in my mind. But somebody brought up, and I think it might have been Dawkins himself, brought up the sexual abuse claims and things that were happening, and he started to squirm in his seat. And I think anybody put in that position where they themselves aren't responsible for anything like that, but represent the organization where that's an issue, would find it an uncomfortable thing to be brought up. But now we know why, because he himself obviously has engaged in such acts. And yeah, and I think it's just despicable. He used his power, he used his influence, and for his own lawyer to then go on and say, well, it wasn't, I can't remember the term, I think vanilla rape. It was vanilla rape because, I can't remember the actual physical act that he was sort of saying about, but basically it wasn't that bad. Right. And it's like, if that's your only legal argument against it, that's not really.
No, that's fine then. I'm only worried about chocolate fudgery.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah. I just think it's disgusting. I mean, the thing is that obviously lawyers are anything. I don't particularly think the legal system is that fair in terms of a defense, because they obviously use character assassination and things like that. And one of the things I was reading the other day, it was an article that was sort of connected to clergy abuse, and it was saying that some victims can actually experience orgasm through rape, the sexual act. But it went on to say that's because that area of the body isn't necessarily very smart. You know, it may be an uncomfortable thing that's happening, and psychologically it's horrible, but your body will function in a certain way. But a defense lawyer will say, well, they must have enjoyed it at some level. And you don't have to be a bloody genius to realize, you know, again, that's just the body doing what the body does, sort of thing. And it's completely subjective to anyone that experiences it. Again, but to have that sort of thought process in his defense doesn't speak well of it. You know, he's better off by saying, you know, he may have performed these acts, but they're what was it he said he wasn't wearing his robes, therefore was acting as his own moral agent rather than a religious moral agent. And I thought, if that's all it takes to defrock, well, I say not defrock, but to take off your sort of insignia of your position, we could all do that. A policeman is a policeman whether he rapes somebody or not. The fact that he took off his, you know, sort of thing, it's just these sort of arguments. And you're like, you're not helping yourself. You're really not. And it just makes the whole thing that much more disgusting and unseemly. I hope he rots. I really do. Anybody in a position of power over children to then use that power has no recourse. I don't care if he, you know, that obviously there's a bit of an issue with, in terms of the Catholic Church, about them not having access to heterosexual sex and things like that. It doesn't matter. There's the grooming aspect is the worst part for me. The physical, obviously, side is disgusting, but they know they're in a position of power. They're in a position of being adored, and especially by children, you know, who will look up to them. That aspect, gaining their trust in order for them to do that, that's the really sick part. And he knew that. He knew that. There's you know, despite his urges and his desires, it's that systematic sort of thing of over time grooming, and it's awful, really awful.
It is. Nacho wanted me to point something out real quick here.
Mm-hmm.
He said it was a vanilla sex assault case, as in there was no defense for his actions, is what he said the lawyer was saying. So he said, even after the fact, you see his reaction. If he has any defense of the facts, he said there is none. He sealed Pell's face. So not just saying that the lawyer was saying it's a vanilla assault case, a sex assault case, as in like there's no defense. Like this is just what it is. Like there's no defense. That's what he was saying.
Yeah, I read that, but then I've also sort of like seen different aspects. Whether or not it was his lawyer, I'm not sure, but certain people in terms of discussing it online were saying something about it not being penetrative with some of the victims, I think, and just all these examples. Yeah. Well, it can't be considered regular rape and things like that. So perhaps I'm getting the two conflated. So apologise for that. But yeah, you know, there is no bloody defence. Is there no defence anyway? If right. You know, we can't go so far as to say that everybody who says I've been sexually abused has to have this complete 100% we believe you this you know, this idea. But it's you know, once if there's facts behind it as much as you can in these sort of things, because of course they take place behind closed doors and sometimes are, you know, investigated or spoken about many years after the fact. You can't technically prove it in a sense, but there is no defense. Come on now, I mean, right. And it's so prevalent that you sort of now people think, well, yeah, he probably did do it because it's happening all the time.
Yeah, it happened all the time. And regardless of how the lawyer meant it, I'm so sorry about the traffic in the background, everyone.
No, it's interesting. See where you live.
The point is, like, yeah, there is no excuse. Mm-hmm. And whether or not someone's coming to orgasm when they're being victimized, that doesn't really matter either. I remember a case back when I was in high school, I think it was around 2008. Someone broke into a woman's house and she I don't know if she knocked him out or what, but she ended up tying him up down in her basement and only fed him Viagra for like 2 or 3 days, and just like had sex with him and just sexually tortured him. And you can bet he orgasmed, because like if you just do that to a penis, that's what happens, right? It's so that has nothing to do with it.
No.
It's still rape. That's the
Mm.
body's reaction
Yeah.
to that. That doesn't mean you have to like it up here to
No.
like whatever's going on down here, like it, for that to like it, or
Exactly.
that reaction.
Yeah. Our bodies have functions, you know,
Right.
there's sometimes we create a mind to body sort of connection, but you know, especially our sexual organs, they do tend to have a mind of their own sometimes.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, essentially, like when you first mentioned that, obviously I was aghast, as you saw, but
Yeah.
at the same time, there are some people who say, "Oh, that doesn't sound so bad." But when you're taking somebody's agency to be able to say, "Well, actually, I'd like to not do that," no matter how pleasing you think the act is, if you are taking away somebody's right to not engage in it, it's a humanities issue. Sorry, not a humanities issue. It's an issue of consent. And I know this sort of word is thrown around, what's consent, what's not consent. To me, it's very, very simple. You know, if I don't want to do something and you're making me do it, that's, you know, I don't understand why people have a difficulty understanding it. And even if things, I don't know how we got onto rape, but even if things were to go so far in a sexual sort of, you know, even if you like somebody and you're having a good time, and then there's something in you that just doesn't quite feel right, or you don't feel well, or you don't feel sexually desired, you know, that sort of thing, to be able to say, you know what, I'm not really feeling it. For a defense lawyer in particular, we had an example of this in Ireland recently, disgusting, where the victim was wearing, I think it was red lace underwear, and she was actually, I think, dating this guy. I'm sorry if I don't know the details about it, but the main important thing was that the defense lawyer, he then went on to allegedly rape her, and the defense lawyer, who was herself a woman, I'm only pointing that out because of the fact, but she said, well, you can see her underwear. What did she expect? Again, I'm paraphrasing. And it's like, well, first of all, you'd have to have gotten her naked to, or, you know, semi-naked to have seen the underwear. So how that drove him to rape her, I don't know. But there is always a point before you engage with somebody where if somebody says no, that should be that. I'm sorry, if you can't have control over yourself, then that's ridiculous. But she was almost using that as an excuse. But even if you, like I said, even if you are, you know, the idea of having, you know, I'm an old married lady, so I have a different perhaps view than somebody perhaps has casual sex or something like that. If I'm not really into it, it would absolutely devastate my husband for me to just go along with it. Or if I was to say, you know, I really don't want to, and then if he said, well, I do, and did have sex with me when I didn't want to,
yeah,
that is it is the definition of rape, because I'm saying no, he's saying yes, he knows that I said no.
Mm-hmm. Because
why is it so difficult? You know, why is it so difficult? And they use the clothes they wear and stuff like that. It gives no agency, it gives no level of responsibility to the perpetrator. And that's another sickening thing. It's not necessarily religious in its foundations, but of course they have their own way of discussing it. You know, people are Jezebels and things like that if it happens, right. And you know, we're all sinners. Da, 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 da. But again, when it comes as a dynamic of age as well, in terms of consent with clergymen and children, it's an even bigger divide. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, because a child can't consent. So that's the biggest issue there, is a child can't consent. That's what sets it apart from every other sexual conversation. For anyone who's wondering, not that our community really has to, because we know that, we know better. But there's a lot of apologists out there who like, well, if a gay is fine, why isn't pedophilia? I've heard that, and honestly, I used that back when I was a Christian, and I know better now. I don't use that argument anymore, because as I have said, I was pretty homophobic. I, uh, I absolutely was, and like I wasn't necessarily mean to anyone about it, but it's
The position you
definitely,
held.
uh,
Is this like a position you held in your mind that?
yes,
Yeah.
and it definitely like gave me the heebie-jeebies, because it was such taboo. I have another question here,
Sure.
if we have time.
Yeah.
Actually, I am actually running out of time. I need to take my boy to school here in about 45 minutes.
Oh,
So I'm good for now, but just a warning,
yeah.
won't be ending
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah.
Aptivist, thank you for your question. He said, ask TT, Kelly, how would you react if an atheist group leader got caught doing pedo? If that happened, wouldn't every Christian be up in arms over it?
Well, they do tend to, when it comes to other schools, other schools of thought and other faiths and things like that, will jump on the smallest indiscretion and use that in their arsenal. What the difference is that when I discussed the Catholic Church earlier, I didn't lump all of the clergymen in with it. I understand that these are individuals, although on a much bigger scale than in any other organisation that I know of, who are, perpetrating these crimes. But I understand they're not all like that, because if they were, it would be an epidemic. You could argue that the way they live causes them to do it, being celibate and so on. But
I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I think we have to treat it as an individual case, because atheism isn't a belief system. We don't have for or against when it comes to paedophilia. If anything, we're at a standard where we say no, everything comes down to human rights. Yeah. And I'd like to think that we all consider the same aspects when it comes to consent. But then there's room for biases and room for opinions, like yourself. You explained how you were homophobic, of course, before you got involved in the skeptic community, I'm sure. But you can't take. It doesn't matter that it's somebody necessarily from the atheist community that did it, because it's such an individual thing. Being an atheist is an individual thing. We call it atheism to give it a grouping and to sort of talk about it as a topic. But we're not getting together sometimes people get together and talk about it, but when there's no dogma, there's no doctrine. Yeah. So exactly. Yeah. So it's I think, I don't know where the land lies with it, but it wasn't David Silverman accused of sort of misconduct and things like that.
Yeah. He was accused. I don't think he was, because he's still like on Twitter. He's still active, but he was removed from his space.
Yeah,
from his position. I'm not sure where that went.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if there's any legal proceedings happening in that, and whether, of course, or not, there was any truth to the claims or not. But do you see how quickly that was dealt with, and how differently that was dealt with?
Yes, very.
So he was in a position where he was seen as this, this person to look up to, in terms of what he'd helped build and his message. But he was held to a moral standard that's fairly intrinsic to what I think a lot of us believe. He wasn't protected. He could have been. I mean, Lawrence Krauss has been accused. I think Neil deGrasse Tyson has been accused. So, yeah, it seems like for every other area of life. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that because somebody is accused that they should immediately, because that going that other end is just, I think, is can be dangerous too. But the difference is we're willing to question it. We're not saying, oh, no, that's David Silverman you're talking about. I don't know him personally. I could look up to him, but I don't know him personally. I can't tell you what happened in hotel rooms when he was doing talks. I can't tell you that. The only person that can tell you that is him and the victim, the alleged victim. So, yeah, I don't think it's they don't get a sort of get out of jail free card because they happen to be people that we admire. Right. And it's often, like you said earlier, about practicing what you preach. People can have really strong ideas of what they consider to be humanist, sort of topics and qualities and things, and still kind of be a dick. You can still be an asshole and be a skeptic. It's lumping everybody in. Labeling does that. It's sort of, it removes the nuance, and it removes the personal aspect of what we're all essentially capable of. I mean, look what happened to me. There's me saying, oh, I'm working with philosophy, I'm working with decent arguments. And as soon as somebody mentioned having sex with a 9-year-old girl after being married at 6, I lost my shit. I did. Although it was justified, I did. I immediately went on the, no, that's wrong. And it is, as we understand it now, but I did jump onto it on an emotional level. So we're all capable. Perhaps that's not a failing of mine, but it's certainly an aspect where I let myself down philosophically, perhaps.
Well, I'm going to push back on that just a little bit, and we're going to see if we can do a little thought experiment, backtrack, just for fun, and stand up for your morals. So, you said you kind of lost your shit, and you just said it's wrong. But I think if we just backtrack what morals are real quick and what yours are, you can justify it. And because we justify it, it makes sense that you would have an initial reaction to something that you can justify, right? So what's what does morality mean to you? And I won't take an hour on this.
No. Oh yeah, I was going to say it could be an episode all in its own. Oh gosh. I think there are varying levels of what we consider personally, our personal morals, and then ones that we have as a standard as a society. And it can depend, and the ethics side of it as well, can depend on your upbringing, your status within society, your location, the nation in which you're brought up, in terms of cultural relativism and stuff like that, where you can say, well, I think that's wrong, but the people in that country can say, well, no, actually we think this. So there is room for being a relativist in that sort of sense. But I think baseline, the flourishing of human nature and humankind, not causing pain to others, and not using them as a means to an end, and treating everybody as a standard of holding them up to standard. And the golden rule is kind of decent in this sense, although I reword it as be excellent to each other from Bill and Ted. I think it's just pretty much the same sort of thing. Do you see how you can sort of flip them out? They can pretty much have the same effect. But to me, but I do find that the wider philosophical questions of what we ought to do and what we ought not to do can be subjective. So I don't think there's a complete mean objective morality. But I think we can all agree as we go through our daily lives, don't be dicks to each other. But then my being kind to you, you might take that as me being a dick. So it's that side of things is subjective. Yeah. So it has so many variables. That's what makes it such an interesting subject. So I don't necessarily believe in an objective morality, but on a very base level, just be sort of kind and nice and have things that benefit you, and that can obviously change over time. There's people living 100 years ago that would seem like very nice people of the time that are doing something I find abhorrent, but they're products of their time and their upbringing and all these other variables. So we learn over time, and unfortunately religion doesn't tend to follow us on that, does it? Especially Islam. There's so many people that will say, oh, what the Prophet did wasn't wrong and things like that, yet they'll say they don't agree, they're not paedophile apologists, or they don't agree with it now. So well, why then, sort of thing. We can understand slavery was bad now. At the time, some people didn't like it, so it's something that does change over time. But yeah, hopefully I've answered the question well. It's a big question.
So I'm going to take that and I'm going to try to put it in a nutshell for you real quick.
Sure.
Okay, so you said it's basically like levels of morality, and it's again, in a nutshell, it's decided by society. Whether it's um, a smaller culture or whichever country, it's decided by morality is built up, structured by society, by what we as a collective think is good or bad. Good being decent, nice to people, and unoppressive, and bad being oppressive, abusive to people, right? Um, so is that close enough so far?
I think so. I think there's obviously there's room for nuance and discussions within that, because obviously we have things like a legal system which sort of gives power to certain people to punish somebody, to have a sort of a decision on whether or not somebody is incarcerated or not, or whether somebody's obviously given a death penalty or something like that in response to what they've done in society. So as a member of that society. So you're going to find people to say, well, actually, yeah, I'm all for that, and then other people who say they're not. So there's differences in that area. But yeah, generally, I think you've pretty much hit it on the head. But then it's an ever-evolving thing, isn't it? So yeah.
So I want to talk about those levels real quick.
Sure.
And I'm gonna put it on a scale. I'm gonna put your levels of morality on a scale instead. Have you seen my morality video?
I don't think I have. No.
Okay, so check it out after this and see. Let me know what you think about it. I don't think it's very long. It's one of my older ones.
Sure.
It's called Measuring Morality. Everyone, go watch this one.
Yeah.
But this is how I like to talk about morality. You put it on a scale. Okay, so instead of saying bad and good, you have better worse and better. Okay, so we don't have an objective good and an objective bad, but we know what we're aiming for is the idea, right? We got the gist of it. So where would you put raping kids on the scale?
Bad.
As far to
yes.
Yeah, as far to this side as we possibly
can. But for so many more reasons than just the obvious as well.
Right. Because there's no consent, there's traumatizing repercussions. And sometimes it doesn't even stop there, right?
Abuse of power, that sort of thing.
Yes. So it is as bad as we see bad being. So now where would you put incarcerating someone for selling drugs for 50 years? How far on the scale would you put that?
Well, this is the thing. There's this in terms from a person, a member of the public, because I'm sure people who are involved in the legal system would see that as a good thing. I think I can't say that it's necessarily good. There's an aspect of taking somebody who's obviously, done wrong in society and things like that, and taking them off the streets and things. But I think that's obviously a bit of an overkill in terms of judgment and sentencing and things like that, because you can't really attest things like drug dealing or drug taking. You can't really attest to how much damage it essentially does. Whereas if you murder someone, they're usually dead. There's usually a dead body, and you've stopped someone living. With drugs, you could have made a lot of people very happy, and it's this transaction. So it's that, what ought to do and what ought not. I think I had an interesting analogy the other day that we shouldn't see it as something either good or bad. It's what's damaging, what's in a prosperous sense good. instead of good and bad, because they're very arbitrary sort of specific things that can mean different things to different people. But when we consider what causes decay, what causes tragedy and damage, and then what we consider to be something that applies itself to growth and prosperity, we can see on the other end. Which we can all, I think a lot of people can recognize. But when that's the thing, when the law gets involved as well, it may sound like a good idea to incarcerate somebody who's been breaking the law, but at what level, at what level, why such harsh judgments for that and not so harsh judgments for another? So the law makes for a slippery slope of decisions that, makes your eyes roll, but it's trying to give an unbiased, unpassionate response to things. It doesn't always do that very well, but it's what we have. It's what we have to try and keep a societal equilibrium.
Yeah. So, yeah, and again, like that topic, like many are, is a gray area. So, but where would you put it on that scale?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Just
can I go in the
middle? I'm glad you like tore it apart, because you need to look at all the repercussions that happens with it, right? So did you say in the middle?
I'd say in the middle, but I think all these sort of things, it's so easy to say, well, where do you find this? But it's got so many levels and so many areas. So, for example, if that person was dealing drugs in order to send their child to a really good Ivy League school, you could say, well, he was doing it for this reason. If that person was dealing drugs, but it was later found out that he had connections to drug cartels that were imprisoning people, forcing them to work in meth labs, or perhaps even worse, was funding terrorism, then depending on the connotations of what occurs, or the consequences, I should say, that can vary and that can change your opinion on it. So there's very rarely, like I said, it's quite a grey area. There's very rarely a complete, like I said earlier, there's no good murders. But then why do we have capital punishment? Because technically we're taking something's life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But I mean, even with that, and I differ from some people, especially humanists, which I deem myself greatly. I think there are some cases where if a person is such a danger to society that they absolutely cannot and can never be part of society, maybe it is better to execute them, for lack of a better word. And I don't like saying that because, again, I'm a humanist. I don't think we should really kill anyone. If we can, hello, trucks. If we can solve problem else-how, if we can medicate someone or put them through rehabilitation, that is obviously the better option. But locking someone up for a life sentence who isn't going to get better, because some could, I think. Locking someone up for a life sentence, or even 50, 60 years, if they make it, that is a death sentence. And it's torturous. It's worse. Some prisoners say, I would rather just die. I would rather just die. So I mean, at least maybe be like Canada, and I don't know if they do in the prison system, but like give them the option of like assisted suicide or something, because there's no reason to, one, burden our economy, looking at it at a political standpoint or economic standpoint, and two, it's inhumane to ruin someone's life that long, even if they did it to themselves. I would at least say give them the option instead of just a cage. I think.
Yeah, it's a case of the punishment certainly not fitting the crime in that sense, isn't it? It's and we give value, or we give these institutions and structures of the legal system the power, which is essentially imaginary power, if you see what I mean. It's, we built them up to have these systems of control with the right, aside from their standing in the legal sort of institution, to say I'm going to take your freedoms away, absolutely. And whilst I think we need it, and don't get me wrong, and I'm not necessarily against the death penalty, but I do find that it's the legal system in the UK. We're so strange here. We often joke people get more time for fraud that they do in this country than they do for murder, and I'm not speaking hyperbolically there. It does seem the case a lot of the time. But in America, you know, people will, like you said, it's not the first time I've heard that example. Of course, you just gave it as an example, but it's not the first time I've heard somebody say, "Oh, they got 45 years for dealing," and you're just like, "What?" You know, what will that do to that sort of person that they don't even have the chance to sort of go back on it? It's not like they've killed somebody and they can't bring them back to life, obviously. And there's something very tearing at the fabric of human nature when you take somebody else's life. And I think it does make you forfeit your freedoms because you've done that to somebody else, crime of passion or otherwise. But yeah, it is a punishment fitting the crime sort of issue there, definitely.
I think so. And I don't think we've done enough research. I don't think we've looked at statistics enough. But I think that closer to right is if someone's selling drugs because they need to make money, then maybe they weren't educated enough, or they're just in a certain kind of poverty that they can't get out of. So throwing someone in prison for 5 to 10 years and educating them, giving them skills, new skills. I just listened to a thing on Intercept's Only Spoken channel that a prisoner made a point, and it's a great argument. And vibrantly, Brantley, yes, I know Norway has a great prison system. Is which skills do you want me to use? Like, if you give someone an education in prison, most people who like go through and get their GED or a college degree in prison, they do better. They use those new skills to build a better life. And that's fantastic. That's rehabilitation. We can do that. But if we don't give them any new skills and we just throw them in a fucking cage to get fucked up and punish them, what skills are they going to use when they come back out? They're just going to try to make a living in the same way, or maybe a worse way than they did before, or maybe they'll just be too scared to like, to fuck up again. So you could use fear as the motivator, but so I think most cases rehabilitation is the way to go. Education is the first thing you want to try to throw at them to rehabilitate them and give them better tools to succeed in the world later, and then maybe medication after that. Other than that, since I have a little bit of pushback, not that I'm going to backtrack, but I'm saying when the person is absolutely like they've been in prison because they murdered a couple people, they've been medicated, they come back out, they murder a couple people. Like, we only do that so much, very little if possible, before you don't give them any more chances. And I think time tells things, right, about a person, and time is the ultimate punishment as well. We don't need a 20-year sentence for almost anything. So I think we have to look at other options after that. Euthanizing, I guess, is what I'm going for. So I'm going to ask you an interesting question, and then we'll probably go ahead and wrap up because
it's going to be a biggie as well. There's going to be a real humdinger, isn't it?
Of course it is, and it is relevant to this topic right here. Thunder topic. Hitler, since we've mentioned him a couple times, he committed some atrocious acts or had them carried out, right? So what would you do with Hitler? How long, we're not going to talk about hell because we don't believe in it. How long should he burn in hell? Because maybe eternity is too much for even what he did. How long would you throw Hitler in prison? What
from the sort of age he was when he would have been caught if he hadn't killed himself onwards. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. By the end of his life,
you've sort of done something interesting there, because you've used an extreme example, but in that case, I'd have to say for the rest of his living days, for many reasons, but I'll try and be quick about them. He may have not perpetrated, pulled the trigger on a lot of people himself, but it was his ideology, it was his will, it was his passion, it was his forethought, it was his organization and that of those around him. It was systematic. It wasn't a crime of passion. He didn't kill one Jew. He wanted to exterminate on a massive level. And yeah, I have no problem, no qualms with letting him suffer, and not to have the death penalty, but to suffer, to engage in not only incarceration, but knowing that he has those the thoughts of what he did, in his mind for the rest of his life, because you can't cause that level of suffering, and not even to be set as an example for the rest of society, but more in the sense of there's possibly no worse punishment than hearing the cries of those you've hurt in a lonely cell somewhere. It sounds wicked of me to say. If I was speaking about anybody else, you'd say, oh my God, perhaps, but he's a very extreme example. A person like Dr. Mengele, if hell existed, I'd love to see him bake in a lava pool. I think I said earlier about people, I don't think people are intrinsically evil, but he was pretty damn close. And I have no problem. Maybe it's a revenge aspect in me, wanting to see him suffer, but there's levels of just human, debauchery and degradation that some people achieve, and they do so through power and influence. And I think they should be the sort of the benchmark of the punishment. Yeah. But I do believe in rehabilitation. But like I said, these people were systematic in what they did. It wasn't an accident. You could argue that they were indoctrinated in a sense, not necessarily religious, but just by their hatred of the Jews and hanging around other people, with their hatred. So, but even so, they did it in such an organized fashion. It was so anti-humanist to be almost, it was nightmarish. What a horrible things they did. So, yeah. So you could have used a sort of slightly less example, but I get what you were trying to say. But no, rot in hell, Hitler. That's what I said.
Fair enough.
I hope somebody's just joined in when I said that. I went, woo!
Yes.
Yeah, girl.
So I have a feeling we'll talk about that a little more, because if anyone watches the full video, they'll probably want to talk about that. And it's an interesting topic, and I'm interested in what people have to say about it, because I feel everyone's going to have a slightly different answer about what to do with Hitler. Hey, man, you have to not talk about Hitler. But anyways, thank you for your input. Thank you for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Did you see the title?
I did. The Thunder is back. Did you? Because we had a different one first.
No, not quite. It was Gray Topics, Skeptic Thunder.
Yes, sorry. Yes, I did.
And we talked about some Gray Topics. And
yes. YouTube channels unite.
That was fun. So I think this was very delightful. Thank you for coming back on. I'm sorry we had to postpone, because you were supposed to be on, what, 2 weeks ago? Almost 3?
Yeah, your poor computer.
Yeah, and it's up now. I'll post a picture of it later today, everyone, so you guys can see my new setup. It's pretty cool, pretty sweet. I'm still working on the background. We just put my old background over some shelves. But yeah, so I'm happy to be back. I'm happy that you're back. And I think this was fantastic. So everyone, thank you for watching this morning. I do need to get ready to go, because I need to take my little boy to school. But yeah, is there anything else you would like to say real quick, or show out your channel?
Yeah, I've got some interesting stuff coming up, some mental health stuff, and I had an idea I didn't get to say, but I'm quite interested in Greek mythology and have been for a while, and I'm going to do sort of a jokey thing on that. That might seem strange for somebody who's an atheist to have an adoration for Greek gods, but yeah, there's some sort of fun stuff coming up with that, and some more atheism stuff. So yeah, just go subscribe, and just like I said with Steve the other night, I am still learning all about this and philosophy and stuff like that. So just know that going in, and then hopefully my points will have resonance with someone. So yeah.
So yes, please, everyone, go subscribe to Kelly's channel, Topic Thunder.
And subscribe to Grace Skeptic as well. That's brilliant stuff.
Thank you. I just got over 400, so so yes, thank you.
Amazing. Well done.
Thank you. Once I get to 500, I am still going to have my own atheist flashback, and I have a special guest interviewing me for that when we get there. So get me to 500 if you want to see racy shit I used to believe, because that's a wild ride, and it involves UFOs. So. It's that time.
Oh, I definitely want to see it now.
Yes, give me to 500, and I'll show you. So again, thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.